Hello! For this challenge, we're going to be learning about flipbook animation. And before we get into our flipbooks at the very end, I wanted to make sure we all understood the basic principles of animation itself, which is squash and stretch and timing. This is an example of the bouncing ball, a very fundamental exercise in animation, and the flight of a bird. While the bird's flight might not be anatomically correct or at a certain pace, this shows the importance of two characters acting in the same scene, which can be very complex. But if you would like to do it in your flipbook animation, I'm going to give a simple rundown of how to put two characters together and what to think for each one. In terms of timing, it is different from how you might normally think of timing. We don't have 60 seconds anymore. That means 60 seconds would be a drawing of frame, right? So if we have one frame rate, that means that one drawing is 1 second. But the less frames that we have, the more choppy, the less fluid our animation will become. A 60 frame rate means we have to do 60 drawings for every single second. The most typical frame rate that you see, or especially in the older movies, is 24 frames a second. It changed to 30. I think it most recently changed to 60 or something really high given computer animation. But you can also go a safe bet between 8 to 12 frames per second without it being too choppy. 12 is very good. That means we're going to do 12 drawings for every second, which is exactly what you're going to be seeing here, actually, because this is oriented at 12 frames a second. The gravity is one thing. Gravity is very simple. We have another principle in animation that's included in your worksheet called an arc. This is the distance traveled from an object and the flow that it takes to get off screen to its destination, or just simple following the rules of gravity for both the objects of a ball and a bird. Okay, and then another idea is when we're talking about timing. Here's all the frames. This is 4 frames, and we have this drastic change in movement. If you can see comparatively between one frame to the other, by the 4th frame, our ball is here, but our bird is only here. Once we go further, we can see that there's a drastic jump right around here. It follows very well, but they're equal, and yet the bird increases in size, and the ball is consistent in its size. Going further, we can see that the bird ends up turning around. And while it turns around, it's curving in this motion. So it's going up here, curving down, going in, coming back out, around. While our ball is still following this simple motion the entire time. There. Now, here is the least impact. This is when the ball uses momentum, inertia, however you would like to think about it. It's basically when the ball loses energy and it stops moving. And the goal of animation is to always recognize and recreate movement in order to have a believable story. The bird is still in place. At the very end, the ball here takes forever to get off our rail and drop down, as we can see, while our bird has decreased in size going into the frame and is reappearing on top. This is because when you draw, The slower the motion, the more frames and drawings that there are in between. So when something's hit by gravity, you're going to have a greater distance traveled, and it's going to have a force that will squish the object down, bring it back up similarly, and then return to its normal state. That also depends on how squishy it is. So we can imagine that this ball is very elastic and rubbery, kind of a cartoonish manner. If it was a bowling ball, it would probably just end up falling straight on through the floor and creating cracks. So this is very important when we're looking at everything together. The more drawings between each frame makes it a slower motion. The less drawings make it the motion faster. This is best shown by the bird up top again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 5th frame, we're already turning into our motion, but yet we barely made it here. In 5 frames, the distance traveled between the ball is here, on the 2nd arc. The distance traveled for the bird is here. That is essentially the very basics, in terms of timing, in terms of what it means to be drawing in between frames, your arcs, and your overall method of drawing. Just remember that when you have 2 objects, even though they're taking up the exact same amount of frames, in this case, the bird is spending much of its time going in a circle to reappear, dip down, while the ball is just going on its natural arc until it loses energy and falls off. This is our idea. I made this so that we can get a better idea of the key differences between how we approach an animation, or how you can approach your flipbook animation in a keyframe style or a straightforward style. I'm turning the sun into a moon. Let me show you. So the sun is turning to a moon. I also included color. These frames down here that you see blacked out on the timeline right here, those are duplicated frames to hold the change in place. That way our eye can be able to recognize it, and the after image will carry on longer, making it last in duration, even though the frame is exactly the same. This is something that's only for technology, of course. Procreate is the app that I'm using. But when you're drawing traditionally, when you're drawing pen to paper, every frame change you do, every frame rate and hold of a frame, such as the ending of this moon, this transition of the sun, and the beginning hold, has to be done by hand. Which means that while I only had to draw 1 panel here, you technically have to draw 3 panels in total to get the same effect. So in order to approach this, you can go 1 or 2 ways. Straightforward animation, A to B, where A, you start at the top, just how the sun looks. Create the image, you color it. You can do a second pass and color it, that's completely fine. But you create the image, you move on to the next frame, and move it slightly forward to what was there before. And then you move on to the next frame, the next frame. And you continue all the way up into your transition. And this one makes you have to build a natural sense of timing, so you know what is appropriate to have your rays appear and disappear, and to change your animation from one image into the next, which in this case, I went ahead and carved out my circle of the sun, and I carved it until it became the shape of the moon, which I demonstrated here, and you'll be able to see this as well. A to B, in terms of keyframe animation, is where you establish the extremities of your animation, which in this case would be A. And then B. And if you wanted to further divide that, you can follow here, which would be C. If you wanted to divide it further, it would look something kind of like this. Just like that. Going and in the middle. So I might do something like A, B, C, and then this could be D or E. And this is creating the carving out of the sun to become the moon. That is a keyframe, and drawing it from one goal in mind all the way to the end is what we call straightforward animation. Both are correct. There is nothing wrong with either one. You can approach either when you do your flipbook. It's just important to know the difference between the two. Hello, so we're going to be continuing our talk about harmony, especially in animation. This is our flipbook. We'll be working with this in order to finish our project. Here you go. As you can see, the importance of the flipbook, as mentioned in the worksheet, is that you are going to be limited to the size and scale of your flipbook. So it depends on however you want to orient yourself, however way you want the flipbook to be facing, whether you want it portrait style, and then you can do a flipbook this way, or if you're going to do it landscape style, which means you'll be drawing everything in this manner. I created a little small flipbook for you. I have several here. This one I used more of an experimental type, so I wanted to show you guys how you can use different materials, and I used simple color pencils, and I played around with the imagery. This is my interpretation of fields. I just kind of made it just simple lines, simple shapes, and then I used the color itself to tell the difference in the plane of the fields. And then it goes into the rhythm of a mountain that reminds me of music. And then we just have simple blades of grass that will become the fields themselves. And I also put little interruptions of blue because I wanted to let you guys see about what happens in terms of continuity. That's really important in animation. When you do something and you interrupt it with something very big or out of place, it's going to be easily noticeable to the viewer. So you want to make sure that you follow through from the frame ahead and the frame before. That is essentially what harmony is about. So there it is, one last time.